Location: Seoul, South Korea. Han River night view. The city never really slept. But that night, Jungkook wished it would. The bar lights were dim, the laughter too loud, and the alcohol burned far too easily down his throat. He had come here to forget the fight with his best friend, forget the rejection from the person he loved. But then Taehyung showed up. Kim Taehyung, his best friend's older brother. The man who never smiled unless he had to. The man who looked too perfect in his tailored black suit, leaning by the counter like a secret waiting to be broken. "You shouldn't drink alone," Taehyung said, voice deep, calm. "Then sit with me," Jungkook replied, trying to sound brave, but his voice trembled. They talked about everything and nothing. About how lonely it felt when the people you loved didn't look at you the same way anymore. About how both of them were tired of pretending to be fine. The rain started to fall outside when Taehyung's hand brushed against his. Jungkook didn't move away. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was the ache in his heart. Or maybe it was the way Taehyung looked at him, like he wasn't just some foolish younger friend, but someone fragile he wanted to protect. So when Taehyung leaned closer, Jungkook didn't stop him. When their lips met, it wasn't rough. It was trembling, desperate, soaked in guilt. "We shouldn't," Jungkook whispered against his mouth. "I know," Taehyung breathed, pulling him closer anyway. The world outside blurred, rain against glass, lights turning golden blue. Taehyung's coat slipped from his shoulders as Jungkook's heartbeat raced against his palm. Every sigh, every touch, was a silent confession neither dared to speak. By the time the storm ended, so had the resistance. And in the quiet that followed, Jungkook fell asleep in Taehyung's arms, not knowing how everything would change with the sunrise, the morning after the soft sunlight spilled through the curtains. Jungkook woke up to the smell of coffee and the sound of someone moving in the kitchen. For a second, he smiled, until reality hit him like cold water. The sheets were tangled. His clothes lay scattered. And Taehyung was standing by the window, shirt half buttoned, staring out like he regretted breathing. "Taehyung," Jungkook's voice broke softly. "You should get dressed," Taehyung said, his tone firm, but his hands were shaking slightly. Jungkook swallowed hard, pulling the blanket closer. "Last night, it was a mistake, right?" Taehyung turned then, eyes soft but unreadable. "It shouldn't have happened," he said quietly. "You were drunk." "I should have stopped." His words hurt more than Jungkook expected. He nodded, pretending not to care, pretending the lump in his throat wasn't growing heavier. "Yeah. It was just a mistake," Jungkook whispered, even though his heart didn't believe it. He left before breakfast, before Taehyung could see the tears that burned his eyes. But as the elevator doors closed, Taehyung's hand clenched around his coffee mug, knuckles white. Because deep down, he knew, it wasn't just a mistake. Location: Seoul, South Korea. Winter approaching, the weeks that followed blurred into gray. Jungkook threw himself into work, into dance practices and endless routines, anything that could keep his mind off that night. He deleted Taehyung's number, blocked his social media, and avoided his best friend's house like it was cursed. But no matter how hard he tried, some nights he'd still dream about it, about Taehyung's touch, the warmth of his breath, the way he had whispered his name like it meant something. And now, his body was betraying him. He'd been feeling nauseous for days, dizzy, his appetite twisting unpredictably. At first, he thought it was stress. But when the third morning came and he found himself throwing up again, he knew. He stood in the bathroom, hands trembling as the small white stick in his hand showed two faint pink lines. 2. His knees gave out, and he sank to the floor, his breath catching in his throat. No, 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 he whispered. Tears welled up before he could stop them. It couldn't be real. He was careful, or at least, he thought he was. That night was supposed to be a mistake, a secret he'd bury and forget. But fate had other plans. For 3 days, Jungkook avoided everyone. He skipped classes, ignored calls, and stayed inside his small apartment, staring blankly at the test in his drawer. When his best friend, Taehyung's younger brother, banged on his door, Jungkook pretended to be asleep. He couldn't face him. Not now. He thought he could hide forever. But Taehyung found him first. It was a cold Friday evening when Jungkook opened his apartment door to find him standing there, black coat, rain still dripping from his hair, that same unreadable gaze. Jungkook, Taehyung said, voice low, tired, but laced with worry. How did you find me? Jungkook's voice shook. You've been missing for 2 weeks. Do you expect me not to notice? Jungkook's chest tightened. He stepped back, trying to keep his composure. You shouldn't be here. Why not? Taehyung asked quietly. Because of what happened that night. The air grew thick, heavy. Jungkook's eyes burned, but he refused to look up. It meant nothing, he whispered. So please, just forget it. But Taehyung didn't move. His gaze softened, tracing the exhaustion on Jungkook's face, the paleness in his skin. Then, almost in a whisper, you're not fine. Jungkook froze. His breath hitched, his hand instinctively brushing his stomach. Taehyung's eyes followed the motion. He went completely still. Jungkook, he said slowly, what are you hiding? The silence stretched painfully. Jungkook's lips trembled, his throat closing up. He wanted to lie, to say he was fine, but the tears finally fell. I didn't mean for this to happen, he choked out. For what to happen? Taehyung demanded softly, stepping closer. And then Jungkook said it, barely audible, but enough to break everything between them. I'm pregnant. The world seemed to stop. The ticking clock, the raindrops outside, the distance between them, all vanished. Taehyung's breath caught, eyes wide in disbelief. What did you say? It's yours, Jungkook whispered. From that night, for a long moment, Taehyung didn't speak. His jaw tightened, emotions flashing too quickly to read, shock, guilt, fear, and something else that hurt even more. Then, quietly, he stepped forward. Why didn't you tell me? Because you said it was a mistake, Jungkook replied, voice trembling. You said it shouldn't have happened. And I didn't want to ruin your life. Taehyung's heart twisted. He reached out, hesitated, then finally took Jungkook's shaking hand. You think I'd ever walk away from you for this? Jungkook's tears fell faster. You don't have to take responsibility. I can handle it, but Taehyung shook his head, his voice firm for the first time that night. No, Jungkook. From now on, you won't handle it alone. You're carrying a child. And I'll protect you both. No matter what it takes. Jungkook's sobs broke the silence as Taehyung pulled him into his arms. For the first time in weeks, he felt safe and terrified at the same time. Because the one man he swore he'd stay away from was now the only one he couldn't live without. Jungkook didn't remember saying yes. Maybe it was the way Taehyung's hand had trembled when he promised to protect him, or the quiet determination in his voice that made it impossible to argue. All Jungkook knew was that 2 days later, he was sitting beside Taehyung on a plane bound for Switzerland, his life in a single suitcase, his heart still pounding with disbelief. The city lights of Seoul faded beneath the clouds, replaced by endless stars. Jungkook leaned his head against the window, fighting the tears that threatened again. Taehyung sat beside him, silent but alert, his hand resting protectively near Jungkook's armrest, as if even turbulence might hurt him. "You didn't have to do this," Jungkook murmured, voice fragile. "Yes, I did," Taehyung said without hesitation. "People will talk, your family will, let them." His tone was quiet, but the firmness in it silenced Jungkook completely. "What matters is you and the baby," Taehyung continued softly. "You'll be safe there. Away from the noise. Away from judgment." Jungkook turned to look at him then. The man who once seemed untouchable, unfeeling, now looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, lips pressed into a thin line, but his gaze gentle, almost tender. He looked nothing like the cold brother of his best friend. He looked like someone who had made a vow, and meant every word. Switzerland. 1 week later the snow fell softly outside the chalet, dusting the pines in silver. Taehyung had chosen a small valley village far from the city. The air smelled of wood smoke and pine. The world was quiet here, like it had stopped spinning just for them. Jungkook stood by the window, wrapped in a thick sweater Taehyung had bought him, watching the snowflakes fall. "You're cold," Taehyung said, coming up behind him with a mug of hot tea. "You keep doing that," Jungkook whispered. "Doing what?" "Taking care of me." Taehyung's expression softened. "That's what I should have done from the beginning." He placed the tea in Jungkook's hands, fingers brushing briefly. The touch sent a shiver down Jungkook's spine, one that had nothing to do with the cold. "You don't have to feel responsible," Jungkook said again, looking at the steam curling up from his mug. "You didn't plan this." "I didn't either." Taehyung hesitated. The fire crackled behind them. "You think I'm doing this because I have to?" he asked quietly. Jungkook didn't answer. "I'm doing this," Taehyung continued, voice low but filled with quiet conviction, "because I want to. Because when you left that morning, I realized something." Jungkook looked up, eyes wide, heart thudding. "What?" Taehyung stepped closer, his shadow mingling with Jungkook's in the amber glow of the firelight. "That losing you was the first mistake I ever made that I couldn't live with." Jungkook froze. His chest tightened painfully, his throat aching as he searched Taehyung's face. "You said it was a mistake," Jungkook whispered, voice trembling. "It was," Taehyung said. "Because I called it that." The words hung between them, heavy and fragile. Taehyung reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Jungkook's face, his touch lingering just long enough to make Jungkook's eyes glisten. "You've been through enough," Taehyung said softly. "From now on, just rest. I'll take care of everything else." "You make it sound easy," Jungkook murmured. "It's not," Taehyung said with a faint smile. "But it's worth it." That night the wind howled outside, snow piling against the window. Jungkook couldn't sleep. He stood by the bed, hand on his stomach, feeling a strange mix of fear and peace. He turned slightly. Taehyung was asleep on the couch, a blanket barely covering him, his arm draped over his face. Jungkook stared for a long time. This man had crossed oceans for him, risked his reputation, his family's wrath, everything, just to keep him safe. And yet, Jungkook didn't know if he could ever let himself fall again. Because if this ended, it wouldn't just break him, it would destroy everything he had left to protect. Still, that night, before blowing out the lamp, Jungkook whispered into the dark, so quietly that only the wind heard him, "Thank you, Taehyung." And even though Taehyung didn't move, his fingers twitched slightly, as if reaching for a dream he didn't want to end.